I'd love to chat through some of your new product
Yeah,
launches. I know you have a couple open source projects that you guys released recently, which are super exciting. Maybe you can walk us through some of those, Kit and others.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. Love to talk. So Kit, I'm really excited about Kit. I mentioned it earlier. The origin of Kit is we do a lot of part of our product is we generate a lot of pull requests, right? So if you're say you we do an analysis of your Terraform code, infrastructure as code, and we see that I don't know, you've got an RDS instance that's unencrypted, right? So there are two ways of solving this. One would be to make a direct change to AWS, right? Like make it S3, not S3, make in this case this would be an RDS API call and fix it, which in the case of emergency is fine. But the correct way to do this, of course, is to go to your Terraform or whatever you're using, Pulumi, and update that, right? So when we detect issues in your infrastructure as code, we open pull requests to the customer's infrastructure as code repo, right? So Case does that. This does two good things. One is it keeps your infrastructure as code there, right? One of the major problems that people have is what's called infrastructure drift, where your actual infrastructure does no longer mirrors or it goes pretty far away from your actual infrastructure as code. We also help with that. So we have a feature in our agent that will detect that and bring these things back in line. But to make a long story short, the idea here is that we're trying to keep your infrastructure secure, relatively inexpensive compared to what maybe defaults would be, as well as preventing drift. So anyway, in order to do that, we have to open pull requests into your Terraform repo. Now, everyone, this is partly due to the complexity of Terraform, but also partly due to the fact that best practices never seem to really get standard. Everyone seems to have very, very different sorts of infrastructure as code setups, to say the least. Where you've got modules here, you've got I don't, just everyone's got something different. I don't think I don't judge anyone's infrastructure as code. Some are different. Ours we have issues with, but they're all very different. So we had to build a lot of sort of like code intelligence to be able to sort through repositories and figure out if we're going to make a change to your infrastructure as code, where do we do that? So we had to find, okay, well, if we're going to update an RDS instance, we have to find where is the RDS instance defined. If is there a module? Is it are the variables in some other file? So we needed to build all this content. So we ended up building ourselves, and unfortunately, there really weren't a lot. There isn't a lot of open source. There wasn't like a proper open source toolkit or library to do this, right? So if you look at like every IDE or what a lot of these even open source tools do, open source, editor type tools is, they need some sort of like code search primitives, semantic search primitives, chunking primitives, file reading primitives. If you use like Cursor, Windsurf, whatever, you'll see on the right hand side, it's like doing stuff. It's like I'm running search or running grep. So those tools, I always wanted to be able for anyone who's building AI dev tools like us to be able to have tools available to that. So we wrote Kit. We extracted Kit from a lot of our existing code base and then wrote additional stuff. We MIT licensed it. We released it just a couple weeks ago, less than that. And that exposes a bunch of primitives. I can show maybe if I can share like if I can see it or my Claude here. I can show a little bit of sort of some of the stuff here and to how this kind of works if we can. So let's see. Okay, cool. So I am in Claude. This is Claude Desktop. And so if you look here at the very top, what we've done is we have like Kit is now here as an MCP. We haven't talked about MCP yet, but we have Kit is now exposed as an MCP tool. And so the long story short of what that means is some of Kit's functionality, like open repository, these are tools or resources that Kit exposes, can be exposed here into any tool. In this case, it's Claude Desktop, and it could be your app, it could be like your server, it could be your agent. And by giving just a little bit of help here, Claude figures out, well, let me invoke some of the tools, in this case, get file tree, that Kit, our toolkit, exposes. Um, and there are various things you can do. For example, you can search code. So what Claude is doing is it's using its LLM tool calling ability to try to figure out what's going on in this repo, right? But we can ask questions like, for example, where is the user class defined, right? This is something you can do, obviously, in Cursor or Windsurf, but in those cases, Cursor and Windsurf is calling its own version of this search code, right? If you're building your own AI dev tools, you can use Kit to actually search code, call these things, have your own functions, right? And then Kit will keep, or rather, Claude Code here will keep doing this, keep making tool calls here to figure stuff out, and then it's able to actually summarize pretty nicely here what this user class is, what it does. It's able to give summaries here, and this is just by invoking a lot of the functions that Kit provides, right? And so the idea of Kit is you can build similar. You can build, I guess in theory, well, I don't know if you could build all of Case, but you could build some of it. Is you could build your own AI dev tools using these primitives and using these open source tools. So that's the big sort of vision of Kit, and we've been pretty excited about it. It's been taking off. A lot of folks that are building code reviewers, for example, are using this. This is just a simple demonstration of it. You can imagine in your own application or agent how you might be able to use some of these sort of functions, searching, chunking, and getting sort of explanations. You can do a file tree. So, for example, I could say, give me a file tree of this repo. This is something, again, that you would want to provide to your LLM as helping your LLM, for example, answer questions. So here's a file tree of the repository. So say I'm building an AI dev tool, and I want to improve the context that I'm sending along to the LLM when I'm asking it to generate code. So here we now have this. So I could ask, for example, if the LLM is going to generate a change, I could be like, well, where should we add the new diff for auth code or something like that? Well, I misspelled add, but it figured out that I meant add. And here it's able to intelligently figure out where this stuff would go, right? So if you're building, again, a dev tool, you can use all of these things. So that's a little hint or a little preview of what Kit can do. You can imagine how we use this specifically for the DevOps analysis that we do, where we're looking through different repositories. But we're pretty excited about what we can do with this kind of stuff.
Yeah, this is actually super cool. I think I have been vibe coding, and I think one of the things that Cursor actually does very poorly is it writes a lot of duplicate code. So you're
Yeah,
like, why did you write two separate implementations of this thing? And then you have to go back and refactor all of the code. And I think over time that will get a lot better, but
yeah,
it's with tools like these that are able to like intelligently grok what's going on within a repo really, really quickly and surface that type of information to the LM. I think it's really exciting. And so, how did you guys decide to open source this, or what is the strategy
yeah,
behind open sourcing, and how did you guys think about that, maybe philosophically as a company? Obviously,
yeah,
there are open source models that work, but just curious about the thought process that went behind that.
yeah. So
We were
yeah,
talking separately with a founder last week about his platform right now is closed, and he was curious, like, should I be thinking about open source? And so I was curious how you guys made that decision.
yeah. So this is an all. I mean, this is maybe it's actually fairly philosophical kind of belief thing with me. I think in developer tools specifically, developer tools should generally the primitives, not necessarily the products, although they can be too, but the primitives should absolutely be open source. I think in developer tools, even GitHub. I mean, story like tell an old story like with GitHub, like GitHub we open sourced almost all of the core stuff that we used to build GitHub, right? So the Ruby interface to Git that we had, and a bunch of other stuff. And in fact, I don't know how much this is known, but like GitLab's first year or two was built entirely on GitHub infrastructure, right? Or GitHub stack, where they took all those libraries. And I think that was a great thing, right? Like GitHub did fine, GitLab did great. So I generally don't think that the underlying primitives and developer tools need to be closed source. I think you may want to build a full product that adds UX. Maybe that is some of your secret sauce. But but I think certainly at the very least, the underpinnings of this should be open source. From a business standpoint, I think it's important for us. I mean, we're our audience, our people are developers, right? So you connect with developers through generally open source and through working with them. I think the most exciting thing for us is if we have contributors to Kit who also maybe happen to want to use some of our real the rest of our product. That's great. Um, but I think that especially as we're approaching this sort of AI dev tools era, I think we maybe started. I think weirdly, I think a fair bit of the early days of AI dev tools have been closed source. I'm not quite sure why, more so than I would have thought. And so I think I'm mostly just looking back at what worked in the past. And I just think we as an industry, maybe this is a little as a hot take or not, but like I think industry wise, we should really be encouraging more of it. I mean, you just saw 2 days ago, or was it a day ago, yesterday? Microsoft basically is going to open source all of Copilot, right? So
Yep.
if they can do that, certainly others can, right?